まるで魅惑と愛想のジルバでもリズムは揃わない信じきれないまま君の胸に抱かれ踊る捨てたはずの希望
As we enter the thick of 2019, with new and exciting shows popping up left and right, it's that time again to look back and reflect on the past year and some of the best offerings of entertainment it gave us. Because of how stacked a year it was last year, I'm sure there's many anime that you would like to see appreciated in this video, and I'm going to stop you right there. It should be apparent that these are my favorites from last year and the shows that I would most heartily recommend. So if you have different shows that you would like to recommend, write them in the comments, or just make your own video. I also want to make it clear that despite being the massive weeaboo that I am, I haven't been able to watch everything from last year. In particular, I feel pretty bad about not finishing Revue Starlight or Planet With. I switched over to the Banana Fish manga about halfway through the anime, and I want to wait for the second part of Attack on Titan Season 3 before making a general assessment of it. So if you think this list is missing something, there is a chance that I just didn't get the time to finish it or decided to omit it for various reasons. That being said, I did finish a lot of anime last year, so many that condensing my recommendations into just 5 was harder than I thought. SSSS.Gridman was my first real experience with the tokusatsu genre, and it was a ridiculous amount of fun. It had stellar direction, probably my favorite finale from last year, and at the end of the day just told a very relatable and emotionally resonant story about adolescence through its main antagonist. After the Rain was another emotionally resonant story about adolescence, but in a much different way, as we follow a young girl who's developed feelings for her middle-aged manager at work. A premise that you would initially write off as kind of shady and weird turned out to be one of the most genuine and pure romance series from last year, following these two characters as they both struggle at crossroads in their own lives. Continuing the thematic streak of adolescence, another show I really enjoyed from last year was Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, where adolescence is an actual plot device that is causing persistent supernatural mishaps in our main character Sakuta's life. The Monogatari comparisons have been beaten to death already, but I can easily say this show constantly engaged me with every arc, due almost entirely to how much I wound up enjoying the characters and the writing. The fact that these series didn't make it into my top 5 just goes to show what an excellent year of anime we had, but of course not all anime are created equally, and now it's time to jump in. These are the top 5 anime you should watch from 2018. Back in 2017, Kyoto Animation released a show called Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. This anime was and still is very important to me for a number of reasons, but one of the most significant reasons is that it's the show that truly got me to look past my stigma towards slice of life series. It opened my eyes to something that I previously thought of as boring and uneventful to a world of episodic shenanigans, wholesome and peaceful character interactions, and an unbelievable amount of good vibes. Fast forward 1 year, and I found a lot of pleasure watching a number of slice of life shows, and in my opinion, the best one of 2018 by far is Hinamatsuri. Hinamatsuri's story is as strange as it is goofy. We follow a member of the Yakuza with an abnormal attachment to vases called Nita, who randomly encounters and begins taking care of a girl named Hina, who also just so happens to have psychokinetic powers. Their day-to-day life sets the stage for large amounts of mischief and funny happenings among a large supporting cast who all get their time to shine. In fact, there are some episodes that don't even have Hina or Nita in them at all, and those episodes are often just as good, if not better, than the ones starring them. It also appeals to my bias because Hinamatsuri shares a lot in common with Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, or I guess I should say that the other way around. Both of them make use of a similar similar episodic structure and even downright share narrative premises. Hinamatsuri has a very genuine core to it, and while that's to be expected with any comedy where you actually want to care about the characters, I was surprised at how far the show would actually stray away from comedy and simply just focus on more dramatic events and how they affect certain people. The most prominent example of this can be found in a best girl named Anzu, and the emotional journey she takes from the beginning of the series to the end. Her story, and basically any episode where we spend time seeing how she develops and learns about the world, are beautiful, and ultimately what made me appreciate the show as much as I do. That being said, Hinamatsuri isn't just some sitcom with dramatic elements, and it would be a travesty not to praise the humor of the show. Unlike Kobayashi's more wholesome and family-oriented comedy, Hinamatsuri goes for a way different approach. Its writing and delivery are so much more dry and cynical. It expects you to know where a gag is going and plays off that in both the characters' reactions and the gag itself. The structure and pacing also really helps the comedy never feel like it's getting stale. Episodes are composed in a way where each half focuses on an entirely unrelated story, and it's almost like having two 10-minute episodes back to back every single week. Hinamatsuri is another shining example of how to handle a slice of life and how to handle a comedy. If you want something feel-good that will probably make you a happier person with each and every episode, then this is definitely something you should look into.
明日は何になるやがて君になる繊細な中身覗いてみてもやもやしてる気持ちがバレたら君は逃げてしまう
In a world that constantly glorifies love and romance as the one true happiness you can experience, it can often feel isolating and strange to be one of those who doesn't actually care. Do you need love to be happy? Are all forms of love equal? What is love? These are the questions and themes that drive my favorite romance series of 2018, Bloom Into You. A romance series that isn't even really about romance, at least not in the traditional sense. Our main character Yu Koito is leaving middle school and entering her first year of high school, when a friend of hers confesses his feelings to her. Yu has been dreaming and idealizing this situation in her head for ages, but when it finally arrives, she feels nothing. This causes Yu to question things about love that she had never considered before, and eventually leads to her meeting another girl who shares these same feelings, Toko Nanami. Nanami has also never felt the spark of love over the numerous amounts of people who have asked her to go out with them, that is until she meets Yu and discovers a part of herself she never knew existed. Bloom Into You is not a series about a relationship. It's not a series about building to a relationship. Bloom Into You is about self-discovery. Our characters, both in the main and supporting cast, spend the entire show learning about why they feel the way they do and are desperate to hang on to the things that make them happy. It's a refreshing take on what is generally a pretty complacent genre, and its premise leads to many subversions of the standard romance formula. I can't stress enough how fantastic Yu is as a character. The dilemmas she faces throughout and the roundabout solutions she comes up with for dealing with them are incredibly engaging and make her that much more endearing. She's so likable, and that generally goes for everyone else in the cast as well. What's impressive is the way that Bloom fleshes out every character and focuses all of their motivations into a singular theme, one of finding value in romance. Every single member we focus on has a different reason and interpretation for wanting to love, and it gives this great sense of complexity to an emotion that naturally should be treated as complex. Throughout the story, I found myself resonating with certain people more than others because of their own interpretations and methods of seeking out love. Because of these clashing ideals, you would think that this would be a story filled to the brim with melodrama and misunderstandings, but the characters are written in such a way that feels mature and respectful. There is drama, but it's not as common as you would expect, and it never feels out of place. Because of this, it gives these moments a lot more impact than other romance drama series that try to force conflicts every single episode. Of course, another thing that lends itself to the impact of these scenes is the downright masterful masterful direction series director Makoto Kato implements. So many scenes are elevated by the way that they're shot or edited, and the direction works as a tool to visually convey the internal feelings of our characters without a word of dialogue spoken. There's a particular scene with Yu and Nanami by a river, and without spoiling, all I will say is that it's one of the most visually impressive sequences of direction I witnessed in anime last year. Whether you're in for compelling characters, a great and subversive premise, or for its technical prowess, Bloom Into You is a great example of the new and interesting directions you can take a genre that has mostly been floundering. Masaaki Yuasa is one of my favorite anime directors of all time. He has a knack for helming shows that are both visually and emotionally evocative, and will take these projects on with such creative vision and unique expertise that you're able to tell it's him from the moment you lay your eyes on it. What I'm getting at is that Yuasa is an auteur, and I know that sounds kind of pretentious, but there's not really any other word I can think of that best describes the stamp he leaves on every single anime he touches. In 2018, Netflix gave Yuasa the reins to a classic and beloved franchise by Go Nagai known as Devilman, and what we got out of it was Devilman Crybaby. This was the first breakout anime of 2018, and for better or worse, Devilman instantly had many eyes on it as it dared to do things that I've frankly never seen an anime have the audacity to do. Yes, Devilman Crybaby was very divisive, as you had people in all sorts of camps between those who claimed it's the 10 out of 10 next Evangelion we've been waiting for, or that it's just an overglorified edgy mess with no actual substance. Obviously, the fact that it's on my list means that I enjoyed it quite a bit, but what I enjoyed even more is the cultural impact it seemed to have on anime as a whole. In fact, the main thing I walk away from this show feeling is that this is important. This is the kind of story that you rarely see told nowadays, and it's told with such passion and creativity that, much like Evangelion, even if you don't end up enjoying it, I feel like it's something that you need to at least give a shot regardless. Devilman Crybaby stars our main character Akira Fudo as he's roped into helping his best friend, Ryo Asuka, study and observe a recent outbreak of creatures known as demons. In the process, he ends up being consumed by one himself, but through his own heart and will, he takes control of this demon and ends up becoming a Devilman. From here, the story takes all kinds of twists and turns as Akira does his best to maintain his humanity in spite of the demonic form he possesses. The main thing you need to know about Devilman that I alluded to earlier is that it's not the kind of series that's really trying to appeal to anyone. Yuasa and Go Nagai basically did whatever they felt like with this story, and it's up to you as an audience member to decide how you feel about it. There are so many sequences throughout that might push the boundaries of what you're okay with watching, and it's honestly something that I heavily respect the series for, even if it also pushed my own boundaries on a few occasions. I respect the series even more, however, for the way that it takes that grimdark and nihilistic shell and manages to place inside a very organic and emotional core about what it means to be human and what it means to have emotions. And before you tell me that's not exactly original thematically, you have to keep in mind that this is adapting a manga from 1972. A lot of the tropes that you're familiar with now were popularized because of this story. Another thing Devilman nails right on the head, sometimes literally, are its characters. If Ping Pong the Animation wasn't a clear enough example already, Yuasa has a gift for telling these grand narratives involving multiple main characters, and still on the side being able to develop and give the supporting cast their own character arcs that blend into the main story like butter. Because of this, no part of this story ever feels like it's unimportant or dragging. Everything feels like it belongs all the way up to the culmination and grand finale that you realize the show was building towards since episode 1. Devilman Crybaby is an anomaly. It feels like something that would never get made today, and yet it did. It pushes the medium in a new, different, and exciting direction, and if these are the kinds of projects Netflix are going to support from now on, sign me up. It's a common law of drama that tragedy and comedy are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other, and oftentimes the line separating the two is as thin as a piece of paper. It's a line that many authors try to ride when writing their stories, and all too often they end up failing. After all, how do you even go about balancing the tonal whiplash that comes with juggling a comedic story with a dramatic one? It's in 2018 where Hisone and Masotan came along and gave me one of the most emblematic answers I could have asked for, delivering one of the funniest shows I've seen all year, as well as one of the most emotionally gripping. We follow our titular main character Hisone Amakasu as she finds herself in a struggle of self-discovery, unsure of what she wants to do in her life or if there's anything out there that she's meant to do. Eventually, she settles on joining the Japanese Air Force on a whim and discovers that the mythical creatures known as dragons not only exist, but they are being taken care of in secret by the government for the purpose of their own missions. If you couldn't tell already, Hisone and Masotan is wildly creative. As a Studio Bones original conceived by acclaimed writer Mario Kata, the sky is quite literally the limit with where this show takes its characters and its narrative. Over the course of its 12-episode run, we're introduced to a wide array of eccentric and quirky personalities within the Air Force. These personalities slowly get fleshed out and expanded upon through their dialogue with one another, and it's in this dialogue where Hisone truly shines brighter than most of its contemporaries. Because of her previous works, I already knew that Okada was a master of writing emotionally engaging dialogue, but what I didn't know was that she was so good at both nuanced and overt comedy. These characters are so weird and different from any other characters I've seen recently. They all have their own tics and quirks and little things that make them stand out. Hisone in particular is a joy to watch due to her bizarre antics and the eventual internal conflicts she has to deal with later in the show. Also, bravo to Misaki Kuno, who voices her, for giving probably the most entertaining and enjoyable performance I've heard all year. Masotan is refreshing because it's focusing around a group of adults who don't really know how to behave like adults. It's a coming-of-age story for characters who are already of age, and it shows how they have to deal with that in the face of handling these immense responsibilities. This is all wonderfully represented by the show's art style, a decidedly cartoonish approach to what is actually a pretty adult-oriented story. All of the main characters look like children despite being in their 20s, and this unembellished militaristic setting is given a much more whimsical and playful vibe. As expected of Bones, the animation is consistently fantastic, characters emote in a way that's both over the top and fitting to their personalities, and the jaw-dropping sequences of Dragonflight are handled just as excellently. Overall, every aspect of this show coalesces into something that I can only describe as magical. Every time I sit down and watch through an episode or listen to the incredible Taisei Iwasaki soundtrack, I only feel this sense of awe and elation, like I'm being sucked into this world and flying with a dragon of my very own. These are the kinds of stories that made me fall in love with anime in the first place, and I am so happy they're still being made. Every so often, I discover an anime that connects to me. A show that tells a story or presents its world in a way where I can say, wow, these creators must have made this specifically for me. I can count the shows that I feel this way about on my two hands. It's definitely a rare feeling, so when a show like that does come along and speaks to me on an emotional level I'm not used to, it makes me want to take a step back and really understand why these things affect me the way they do. The moment I finished A Place Further Than the Universe back in the season of Winter 2018, I knew for a fact that it would be my anime of the year. You might find that to be jumping the gun, as 2018 was just getting started, and who knew what other series were waiting, but it was just something that I knew in my heart would not be topped. And sure enough, here I am 1 year later, telling you all that it is the best anime I watched in 2018. No other series from last year made me cry harder or smile harder than this one did, watching these 4 goofballs go on an adventure. A Place Further Than the Universe's story is set up through main character Mari Tamaki feeling like her youth is going to waste. She's not really done anything of importance throughout her school life, and she feels like everyone else are leading much more ambitious and exciting lives. Already, this premise is hitting a little too close to home, but through a lot of various circumstances, she winds up becoming friends with 3 other girls, and they have a plan to do something that's never been done by a high schooler before: set foot on Antarctica. While it is a truly ambitious goal, this premise is mainly a backdrop to explore the individual personalities of these 4 girls and the way they become close to each other over this amazing journey. It cannot be understated how incredible and endearing these 4 girls are, and how inspirational their adventure is. It's one of those things where it legitimately feels like you're watching an anime telling of real-life events, because of how tactfully the characters are written and the surprising amount of realism that's given to such an outlandish concept. This feels like something that could actually happen. Universe also has a masterful understanding of setting up character and plot threads early on and giving them amazing payoffs later in the series. Obviously, I don't want to spoil any of them, but if you're the type who pays attention to little details sprinkled throughout a show, I think you will find the way this story plays out especially rewarding. It's these payoffs that ultimately make the show what it is: a very heartfelt and powerful exploration of girls living their lives to the fullest. And yeah, I could go on and on about the many other things it does right: the music, the comedy, the pacing, the direction. It's all phenomenal. It all combines into something beautiful, but the only thing I can talk about that conveys how much I love this series are the emotions it makes me feel, the way it made me laugh, and especially the way it made me cry episode after episode. And I'm not just talking about some single tear, I mean downright sobbing. I mean the kind of weeping that lasts 15 minutes after the episode has already finished. It's hard for me to put into words how big of a spot these girls and this series have in my heart, but I hope some of those emotions came through, and I hope any of you who haven't already seen the series give it a shot for yourself, because it is my favorite anime of 2018. Thank you all so much for the amazing year you've given me. Your support, engagement, and all of the friends I've made in the community have made 2018 one of the best years of my life. And I cannot wait to see what the future holds for this channel. Let me know in the comments what anime you loved the most from this year, and as always, like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, follow me on Twitter if you want more of my cool opinions, join my Discord if you want to be friends, and finally, of course, have a great 2019.